Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another very well-balanced extra top hat on top of my forehead, which is definitely not about to fall off and cause my foot to hurt. Otherwise known as a Warframe video. Okay, I'm gonna start this out simple, and we're gonna get this out of the way now, and only do it once, because otherwise, if I don't, this video is gonna be 9 hours long. So, without any further ado, due to the subject of this video, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the new, the improved, remastered, updated, super shiny Kuva guide. And of course, as ever, if you want to take part in these videos or come and join us, then I'm going to do a social media shout out. If you feel like joining us on Twitch, we stream every single day for about 8 to 12 hours, focusing on positivity, Warframe, and all that jazz. There's a link down below. We get you involved with the videos so you can be in them. And if you feel like keeping up to date with the stream, my Twitter link will be down there as well. Go follow them, go and join us, and have some fun. That is right, my dudes and dudettes. It's been a while, but with all the new game modes and just general game improvements to how I get the information across, I thought now would be as good of a time of any to go back and remake and improve upon my Kuva guide, explaining everything and what there is to do with Kuva, and as well as everything you'll ever need to know about Kuva in general, because let's face it, Kuva can be a little bit confusing at times. So, we're going to explain what it's used for, how to get it, how good it tastes with fried chicken and onions, and yeah, everything to do with Kuva. Obtaining Kuva will be something you actively start opening avenues to farm for once you've completed the War Within. And then once that's complete, you'll have the Kuva Fortress loitering around your star chart. By comparison to our last guide, there were maybe only 1 or 2 avenues that would be actively followed to farm for Kuva. We now have a number of additional methods to farm Kuva, so with that, we're going to list off all the existing and new methods, explaining the strategies behind them, and then we will take a look at the optimal ways of farming it, and the best avenues to approach earning as much as possible. The biggest and most obvious ways of earning Kuva are the Kuva Siphons. These mission supplements will be unlocked as you complete the War Within, as mentioned previously, and are certainly the most direct cycle of farming, and the largest amounts of Kuva in a short period of time. Kuva Siphon missions are the missions that will appear on the 2 closest planets to the Kuva Fortress. Keeping in mind, the Kuva Fortress does move every now and again, so you will need to keep an eye on where it is in the day to know where the Kuva Siphon missions are spawning. The Kuva missions are then designated by a single Kuva droplet for the regular Kuva Siphon, and a Kuva Flood is signified by 3 droplets of Kuva. And at any given time, there will be 5 Kuva Siphon missions and 1 Kuva Flood. And once you've done the ones you want to, you'll need to wait 30 minutes from the spawn of the Kuva missions to get a refresh on where they'll be. Kuva Siphon missions are quite straightforward. They will often a mission identical to the node it's taken over, but when choosing this mission type, the gods of Kuva will choose to lay a Kuva Siphon egg somewhere in the mission. And like any good game of Where's Wally, you'll have to go and find it throughout the mission. More often than not, the siphon will be placed in the general direction of your mission objective. And in the case of things like capture and exterminate missions, it will generally be in your path towards your objective. However, for rotational open-ended missions, good luck. Once found, the Kuva Siphon will activate and start spawning I must prevent myself from doing that. It will start spawning Kuva enemies. The majority of these will be regular Grineer Lancers, Butchers, and your typical Grineer enemies and the like. But the ones you've got to worry about are the Kuva Guardians. These, ladies? Question mark? Are similar to their iteration during the quest of the War Within. They start completely immune to damage and hit like an absolute mother trucker. Sometimes they'll even have little Kuva jesters going on their shoulders, which are funny. And to expose them to regular damage, you must use your Void Blast from your operator. That will then make them vulnerable to damage, and then you can nut them down as quickly as possible, because they will eventually regain their immunity to damage, because apparently the Void is stronger than all forms of DE coding. So, big busty Kuva enemies aside, the siphon itself is completed rather simply. You see that Kuva siphon? You see those hentai-inducing tentacles dangling down by its side? Well, every now and then, it will erect its perverse appendage and start sucking really, really hard. And somewhere off in the distance, a very horny weeaboo anime cloud of Kuva will notice its senpai and begin making its way slowly towards the hungry hippo of a Kuva Siphon tentacle. Should the Kuva cloud reach the tendril, then it will be consumed. And like that last exam you took, too many fails means you have to come back and retake it again. TLDR, if you let 8 clouds get molested by the Siphon, you get 8 red marks signifying your failures, you lose. And the overall reward is gone. Instead, you will gain a tiny amount of Kuva for each of the tendrils destroyed, and it's not that much, I can guarantee you that much. And if you didn't destroy any tendrils, well, much like Willy Wonka says, you get nothing! Process of actually doing this properly is quite simple. In essence, you need to shoot the cloud of Kuva with your Amp or Void Blast to blow it up. The tendril will then be destroyed that was sucking it. Should you then repeat that 4 times for each tendril, the Siphon is destroyed, and you'll get a chunk of Kuva as your reward. For a Kuva Siphon mission, you will get 550 to 700 Kuva, and for a Kuva Flood, you'll get 1,100 to 1,400. The main difference between a Kuva Siphon and a Kuva Flood, other than the size of the reward, is the Siphon will have enemies around level 20 to 30, and the Kuva Flood will be level 80 to 100. So, more difficulty for more reward. Wait a second, is this the only part of Warframe where higher difficulty rewards with a better reward? NANI?! Once the Siphon has been destroyed and you've mopped up the mess of Kuva that you've left over, you'll need to carry on and complete the regular objective of the mission, and then leave. Really, Kuva Siphons are definitively the most simplistic ways of getting Kuva, and even for the Flood, you don't really need much in terms of preparation to get this done. Simply put, because of the higher level enemies, you'll just need to optimize yourself more. For the Flood, I'd advise relying on making sure you have some optimization in build and setup. Although admittedly, you can just haphazardly run through and rely on your operator to soak up the Kuva and rush on through. However, for missions where killing enemies is a mandatory element, you'll definitely need to put some consideration into what you bring. And maybe for more durable frames to stay alive during the onslaught of the Kuva Mamas especially. Kuva Mamas! Now, there are ways to optimize your Kuva income through the Siphons specifically. Some big recommendations here, and for any farming in general that you do, if you really want to increase your efficiency, bringing a Smeeta Kavat. If you proc the loot duplication charm buff when a Siphon is destroyed, your reward will be doubled. On top of that, having a loot resource booster, even if it does cost platinum, will double all Kuva income. Which, if you play it right, doing a Kuva Siphon could net you upwards of 5,000 Kuva for a Flood. So if you have your loot duplicator active and get a Smeeta Kavat buff, oh, that's a lot of Kuva you're going to be getting. But in all seriousness, now that you've got the main bulk of Kuva farming out of the way, there are multiple avenues you can approach in order to subsidize the gap between waiting for your next Kuva Siphons to spawn. Because ideally here, the best way of earning Kuva is the Siphons. So if you could do, you would basically farm Siphons all day, every day. However, if you do it efficiently, you are likely going to run out of Kuva Siphons before the new ones are ready to spawn. So to fill in that gap, these next suggestions are the other avenues you can approach for farming Kuva. Cetus Bounties on Cetus offer 100, 300, and 500 Kuva depending on the level of bounties you go for. And even though they are not that big of a Kuva reward, they are something you subsidize through the process of just doing your bounties. And for the most part, I wouldn't recommend doing this specifically for the Kuva. It's just nice to get a bit of extra Kuva whilst you do the bounties and farm for whatever else it is you're after. Every day, you'll have the opportunity of earning 6,000 Kuva through the sorties, as the sorties will give you one of many different rewards, one of which is that 6,000 Kuva chunk. So even though it's not a consistent way of farming Kuva, you'll definitely want to make sure you do your sorties just in case you can get that extra bit of lovely chunky Kuva. Tavaluni Kuva Survival will give 200 Kuva for every life support capsule you convert into a Kuva Siphon and successfully defend for 1 minute, doubling if you bring a Smeeta Kavat and it gets its charm buff during the process of the Kuva Siphon being destroyed, similar to the regular Kuva Siphon missions you would do normally. Tamu Kuva Disruption will give you 100 Kuva for rotation A, 200 for rotation B, and 350 for rotation C, and 50 Kuva for every Demolist Demolisher you kill. Admittedly, this one is probably better for quick sequential bursts of Kuva farming, but this is entirely down to personal preference. This method does net you in and around the same amount as the Kuva Survival, so deciding which one you go for comes to preference of playstyle and which mode you prefer going for. Additionally, you can also purchase 10,000 Kuva from several different sources. You can purchase 10,000 Kuva from Nightwave for 50 Nightwave credits from the Nightwave store. Also, you can purchase 10,000 Kuva from the Arbiters of Hexus vendor on any relay for 25 Vitus essences that you farm from arbitrations themselves. Although arbitrations will be something you definitely do later in the game, this is another form of opportunity you can get to make a bit of extra Kuva should you have all the rewards from Nightwave already, or maybe you've been farming out arbitrations for a bit of a challenge. Either way, these do give you avenues for farming larger chunks of Kuva for something that you would naturally do as part of your gameplay loop. And finally, relating to the Kuva Lich system, and in somewhat of a relation to the bounties mentioned earlier, downing a Kuva Lava Link that spawns will net you 100 Kuva. Using your Parazon on a Kuva Lich will give you Kuva for every time it's used on said Lich. The first stab towards the Lich will give you 150 Kuva, the second will give you 200, the third will give you 250, and capturing a Lich fully will give you 300. Now this is not again something you will actively go out of your way to farm for Kuva, similar to the bounties earlier. Instead, it'll be something you do and earn Kuva vicariously whilst doing other objectives. So, now that we know where Kuva comes from, and how important resource boosters are, and diversifying your game modes up, and how powerful Smetakavats can be in terms of duplicating your Kuva rewards, now you probably want to know efficient ways of farming Kuva and what order to process these modes in to make the most amount of your Kuva. So, let me break down some of the more efficient ways of earning Kuva. But a lot of this is subjective, bear in mind, and down to personal preference. So even though this method I'm about to give you definitely nets you a lot of platinum, I'd recommend testing things out for yourself, seeing the method you personally enjoy. Because a lot of the methods you go for when it comes to farming Kuva depends on the time you have. The method I personally use to farm the most amount of Kuva is the following. Starting with the Kuva Flood. The Kuva Flood is always one of the best methods to start with, as it offers the highest amount of Kuva for the shortest period of time you'll invest into it, to get that initial massive surge of Kuva coming in. Making sure to have my resource booster and Smetakavat with me for that extra bit of efficiency. What I'll then do is go for the Kuva Siphons afterwards, that are on a linear mission type that would take less than 5 minutes. Tileset depending, usually that would include things like exterminates, captures, and certain spy missions, as we want to be as time efficient as possible. You want to avoid things like survival or disruptions on things like that, because that limits you to being stuck in those missions for a very specific amount of time, which is usually longer than you would want to be in those missions for, and would better be served spending that time on missions that give you Kuva quicker. Once those shorter missions have been completed, your choices branch out and come down to preference of play, as there isn't much difference, as mentioned earlier, in terms of the Kuva you earn between your choices from here. Kuva Survival and Kuva Disruption are these choices, and definitely offer the second highest amount of income of Kuva by comparison to the other mission types. And additional rewards come with them as well in the forms of relics, endo, and the like. Ideally, you'd go to these for a full cycle to rotation C, which for the survival is 20 minutes, or the disruption would be for 4 disruptions being destroyed. Especially for disruption. Disruption is something you do in short, quicker bursts, and generally becomes slightly more efficient than the survival, because the survival you kind of have to be there for 20 minutes. Although with the survival, you could basically go indefinitely until you no longer feel comfortable with, or your survival basically being non-existent anymore. And realistically, you can keep doing these types of missions until the siphons reset, so that you can repeat the process over again. Or, going off on a different tangent, you can go for the arbitrations or farm out your Nightwave missions to subsidize it even further. Arbitrations are a half-decent, repeatable thing you can keep doing over and over again, and should you get the right setup in the terms of the tile set you get, such as a defense or an interception, then you can definitely increase your time efficiency here. But as mentioned, the TLDR of the process is to always start with your flood, do the siphons that are quick, and then after that, you can either do your survival, do your disruption, or do the other siphons that had a longer period in them. Otherwise, the time that you've completed the flood and the easier siphons, after that, it's just about filling in with as much Kuva efficiency time as possible, until that cycle resets itself. But of course, this all comes down to personal preference. The other methods of earning Kuva through the bounties and Nightwave and the like are all then complementary to your general gameplay loop, and are not usually what you'll actively farm for, as they do give significantly less Kuva, or they really just take a lot of time for getting smaller amounts. Either way, you see the point here. It's all about time efficiency. Sometimes if you want to treat it more casually, you can go for a more casual approach. Depends what your aim is here, as with everything in Warframe. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a much more streamlined, at least in my eyes, way of explaining what Kuva is, especially when you compare it to my old guide, which was literally just me talking to my Twitch chat explaining what Kuva was. It's surprising to see how far we've come along with our YouTube content, isn't it? So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, again, make sure you come and drop by our Twitch sometime if you feel like taking part in these videos. There'll be a link down below. And if you feel like maybe following my Twitter as well, that'd be pretty cool. And I'm getting a bit of a twitch. Hang on. Just thank you for watching the video. Make sure you leave a like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff. Make sure you press the bell down below. I can't hold it anymore. Thank you for watching. I'll see all of you top hatters in the next video. Cool!